Hello, folks, and welcome back to the Marketing and Business Show. My name is Peter Langan. I'm absolutely delighted to be here with you, and I'm joined by Alex. Alex, how is all going in Scotland today?
Today in Scotland is good weather. What else is new? I need to think of a different way to introduce myself on the podcast, because at the minute I jump on and say, yeah, everything's cool, been busy, been doing this. But to be honest with you, I've been in the trenches for the past couple of weeks now, working on some new projects and some different bits and pieces. So I've literally just my head has been buried in the sand with that. So I literally almost haven't seen friends or civilization or anything because I've been so deep in doing this. Mm-hmm. And it will pay off, which is great. And I love doing it, to be honest with you. So that's been my past couple of weeks. So I've just been head down in the trenches.
So that's kind of like a compounding thing, isn't it? Like, just the more you do and you just keeps building eventually, like.
Volume. Literally, volume is the key to everything. Just do more of what you're already doing if it's not working.
It seems to be that, all right? Just more and more and more of what you're at, eventually it just multiplies out.
100%. And it kind of relates to what we want to talk about this episode, right?
Yeah, so we were discussing what to really speak about, and I think it's something that probably affects all business owners, all entrepreneurs, everyone in this game, and that is
everyone.
Yeah, well, everyone too. Yeah, true, very true, Alex. But I think maybe in this game it can be magnified maybe a bit more because you're putting yourself out there.
Before we do jump in, I just have to point out that unlike previous episodes, my internet is playing ball tonight, and we are on 99% upload speed rather than 30%. So. Fingers crossed, I will
Things
stay
are
on
happening.
the podcast.
Yeah. You might have traded Ropey in for ISDN or something.
Okay, so fear of failure. That's what we want to talk about.
Yes, fear of failure. So, Alex, what is failure?
Well, that's a big question, isn't it? Or a big, you could unpack that quite a lot, couldn't you? What is failure? I reckon you only fail at something when it comes to what we're doing or anything somebody is pursuing as a goal if you give up and you stop working towards that goal or that thing. So let's say, for example, if you, quote, fail at something, I don't necessarily think that is a failure. It's almost just like you've just found one way that doesn't work, right? It's almost like an iteration. And through these different iterations, you find out what doesn't work. But through that as well, you also find out what does work. And you only, quote, fail if you give up and stop completely working towards whatever it is you want to achieve. And that applies to literally everything as we've been experiencing, right?
Yeah. It's funny. Even if you stop doing something, I don't know if you failed, because you probably can take learnings from that. If someone measures themselves, if you ask a fish, remember what's that old saying? If you ask a fish to, measure its success by how well it can climb a tree, it's never going to climb that tree. And then I would think it's failed. But whereas maybe it's not supposed to do that. And I think that when people are trying to do certain things and they feel like they're not getting where they want to be with that, it doesn't actually mean they've failed. It just means that they're not there yet, but it's all part of their journey, their story. If things were easy, everyone would have got there anyway, and everyone would be doing it.
That's kind of what I was pointing out. I meant, if you tell yourself, if you tell yourself consciously, right, I am literally giving up on this goal, I'm not going to work towards it. To me, I would class that as, quote, a failure. You can still obviously have learning lessons from that, but if you're actively constantly trying to work towards something and you're constantly coming up against barriers, hurdles, quote, failures, then you are still progressing forward, right? You're still creating forward momentum. I mean, what's that? I mean, we actually looked at this, didn't we? I didn't look at it. I mean, perspective is a big thing here, right? I mean, if you are feeling like you are not progressing towards something and you're almost regressing, if you zoom out on a bigger scale, you'll probably see that your progress is going toward. If there's a chart, it's going towards the right, it's going up. It's it's going up. In some direction, it's going up, but you may be in a bit of a downward space in time. But on the grand scale of things, you are still moving towards your goal or whatever it is you're working towards. And sometimes it's hard to recognize this. We talked about this on one of the previous podcasts where we talked about momentum. because that to me is something that once you have it, do everything in your power to keep it. Because once you get momentum, you get on that momentum train. That to me is when the most progress happens, and I feel at my best personally. Whereas when you don't have it, I literally feel like a flailing fish trying to climb a tree.
Yes. And just surprisingly, it doesn't take a lot to get that feeling. It's just a few wee little things. Suddenly, it's away, isn't it?
Sometimes I feel that to get momentum back, if you can't get momentum in yourself, go and help someone else get momentum, and don't expect anything in return, and you'll quickly get momentum for yourself again.
That's funny. That's actually a really good thing. I never actually thought of that. It's funny. Like, I think fear of failure. It's a difficult one to discuss because I think it's something that's held me back in my life, in my business life, for a long time. But if one had asked oneself, like, what are you afraid of? You nearly don't know. It's just afraid of failing. And it's funny, like, in this game, in what we're doing, like, it's not the normal path. We've talked about this before as well. Like, people would always say, go get the safe. It was the first episode. Get the safe job in Facebook or whatever. But we've seen what happened there. People were let go. You know what I mean? Or Google or Amazon or whatever. Like, I think the only truly safe job is your own job. But saying that, because it's not the same as doing these traditional things that society kind of expects you to do, you can feel like you failed, or people nearly imply that you failed, maybe indirectly, even through their actions, and they mightn't even realize they're doing it. And I think that can be probably some of the hardest things for young business owners and things like that. Like, I think for people like us, if people are more like, what are you doing? And actually look at it and say, well, oh, I get it and I see it. And yeah, we shouldn't care what other people think. But at the same time, we're human. We are, maybe you're different, Alex, but we're designed in some way to take feedback from those around us. And that could be from society as a whole. And society doesn't really encourage the entrepreneur, the self-starter, the business person. It doesn't really push that. It wants people to nearly be a drone, be a robot. That's what society wants. This is getting really deep, but this failure, that's why society kind of pushes this as a bit of a, unless you're following the path, you are kind of, you're failing at life. Maybe I'm way off on this, but it's kind of just thoughts in my head.
I wouldn't say way off. I think you're actually quite bang on the money, but I think what a lot of people crave is certainty, right? So people want to know, like, that whatever is going to happen in the future is the certain thing, which is why being employed is the certain thing, right? You're going to have a paycheck at the end of every month. You're going to, you can plan for things. You can be certain about things. But like we discovered recently and stuff, the rug can get pulled to you pretty fast underneath you. And your, quote, certain employed role just literally turns into the most uncertain thing ever. So the only certain way for certainty is to literally bank on yourself. And I mean, just take what we're doing, for instance, right?
Yeah.
We're literally stepping into the unknown. We don't have any certainty whatsoever. Like,
no
income every month at the minute is gradually growing, which is fantastic. But it's not certain. Like, everything is uncertain. And if somebody had told us at the start of this journey, right, if you work on this goal, Peter and Alex, and at the end of 3 years, you're going to have this much money in your bank account, and you have this many clients, you're going to be, quote, this successful, you would do every single action to get to that goal because you had, like, something to work towards. But with what we're doing, with uncertainty, we're literally, in essence, we're taking stabs in the dark, and we're figuring out ways that work and ways that don't. And for every way that doesn't work, it's just an iteration towards finding something that does work. And I think it's almost trying to figure out a way to embrace this fear of failure as a good thing. And it's not exactly easy to do. Like, it's way, way easier to say than do. Than just, just embrace the fear of failure. Just fail forward. And
I don't mind. I don't mind.
Make all these mistakes. And the more mistakes you make, the closer you'll get to success. Yeah, that's kind of like the concept, the principle. But in practice, like, it is very much different because when you experience a mistake or a setback, or you lose a bunch of money, like we lost £8,000 on some cat zippers, or like from the tent in the previous episode.
Yeah. Again, I'll remind you the most popular episode to date, Alex. Most popular episode to date.
It does set you back, and it does hurt your mental state, and that's why it's so important to like work on self-development, work on yourself about this stuff, because listen, the more you fail, fantastic, great, but you can't. I do believe there comes a point where you have to almost you have to embrace failure for one, but you can't keep failing, because that is soul destroying. But from what we've experienced, the more times that we've learned from failure as a lesson, we've taken almost like 2 steps back and 4 steps forward kind of thing, and we've just moved on to the next challenge and the next firefight and the next obstacle we've got to get over. That's kind of what it's been like for us. It's
funny. 2 things. One thing, I laughed when you were saying all that. I was like, did you ever try, I'm sure you didn't, but did you ever, and I didn't actually either, but I've heard about it, tried to get a mortgage as a business owner versus an employee?
I have not tried to get a mortgage as a business
owner. I thought so, Alex. I thought so. But apparently the banks anyway, if you're an employee, it's like, great, there's your wage. We can multiply it across. This is how much we can give you, right? But if you own that company, they're like, we need to see the books, and they look at it. But yet the employer could let the employee go, but they don't think of that at all. And they're saying, over 30 years, this is your wage. So we'll take this risk on you. But if you're a business owner, it's like, I heard a bank say something funny to someone I know, and they said, your idea of risk and our idea of risk are very different. And I was just thinking, the banks lost all their money in the housing crisis and had to be bailed out. But that's it. Where was I going? I completely lost my train of thought now. Guys, this is completely live. I think that's what's beautiful about it. But
I have an interesting concept, actually. So we're talking about this fear of failure, certainty, uncertainty, right? I've just come across a cool graphic, and obviously I can't show it because we're on podcasts and stuff. But let's just say, for example, in your comfort zone, when you are certain about things, or let's just call it the known, this is kind of like where things are kind of boring, if I'm honest with you. Like, nothing really happens in that area. I mean, yes, fine, you are content, you live, but you don't really experience the growth, right? And I think as humans, we are made to progress towards things, or we are made to grow, right? And this graphic is really cool, and it demonstrates this. So it has, outside of this comfort zone, outside of the circle, is called the unknown. And underneath it says the word anxious. So what it's basically saying is, when you're stepping out into the unknown, it does feel anxious. You are going to feel uncertain about things. However, it does say on the edge of this circle, it's called the edge. That's where you're going to feel the most fulfilled, where you're on the edge of the known and you're stepping into the unknown, where you're kind of slightly anxious. That's where the most fulfillment comes from. And it's probably where you're going to find a lot of the positive progress, if you like. So you kind of like, you've almost got one foot in the comfort circle, or in the known, and one foot in the unknown, and you're kind of making progress that way. That's kind of like an interesting way of thinking of things. I wish I could show you this, but like, I've just found a graphic on the internet, and it kind of demonstrates that quite well.
No, absolutely makes sense.
Hopefully it does make sense, but I feel the fear of failure is something that we could unpack for a long time, and it's one of those mental inner game things that you probably spend your whole life working on. And I think everybody should work on it, whether you are in employment, a solopreneur, an entrepreneur, building your own thing, whatever you are, whatever you class yourself as. It's something that everybody should work on, because the better you get at it and the more you accept like the here and now, the more you can grow and progress as a human, as a person.
Well, here's the thing, right? I was just thinking back, like, and we kind of touched on this earlier too, like all our failures kind of led us to where we are today. Like, everything always leads to the next thing, kind of strangely enough.
100%. And you would only realize that, though, and you can only connect the dots looking backwards, right? That's like a famous quote, isn't it? So if we literally connect the dots back of how we got to this podcast right now, we have literally made the mother list of all fuck-ups. Sorry if this is supposed to be explicit or not, but we have literally
we haven't decided really, but it's mostly okay, I think, this episode.
I've decided our fates now.
The whole thing is, I was 18.
Parental advisory. Anyway, I don't even lost my train of thought. What were we even talking about then? I can't remember what we were talking about.
Just all the connecting the dots, looking forward, looking back, not looking forward. You can't do it looking forward. You can
Exactly,
kind of imagine, but like we're looking back, we can see how all these things led us to here.
Yeah. I mean, if we connect the dots looking back and we specifically focus on the things that we had failed on, essentially those failures have helped us fail forward. Like if we looked at like, okay, this is what didn't work out about this specific venture we went into. Okay, where did what conversation did that open up? And where did that conversation lead to? And that is literally essentially what we've done for the past, I don't know how many years we've been working together, Peter, 4 years, maybe 3 or 4 years.
I was thinking we met like probably 5 or 6 years ago. And I remember chatting to you when I was in Nashville on the computer. You were in New Zealand or something.
Oh, real. So that was literally, Christ. Maybe I was going to say 10 years ago. I don't think it's 10 years ago though.
No,
maybe
not 10. It's about 6, maybe
7 or 8 years ago, maybe. Yeah, something like that.
Hard to believe.
Wow.
Indeed. But also, again, it's coming down to like people looking for certainty. You were saying that like this podcast, again, could be an example. Like, we're creating these episodes. There's nothing certain about it. All we can be certain is that if we record an episode, it goes live. Eventually we'll get to a bigger number. People say things happen at bigger numbers. So we'll keep at it. But it's all fun and we're getting better. I think we're getting better at this, slowly.
I'd say one thing that's helped me a lot, actually, before I forget, right? When it's not specifically a fear of failure, but talking about this podcast specifically, I mean, we could have had a massive goal with this podcast. I mean, like, right, we want to get to this many downloads a month. We want to get this many sponsors on the show. We want to make this much money from the podcast. We want to collaborate with this many people. But these are all sometimes, in essence, these are things that we can't control, right? So what about if we flip the script and just think about the things we can actually control? What do we have control over? The only thing we have control over this podcast is showing up and deciding on how many episodes we're going to launch every single week and showing up and shipping those podcasts. And that's all we can control. But if we do that, that will essentially get us towards those bigger goals, I would have thought. And if we don't hit them, I'm fairly sure we'll get pretty damn close.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. And like, you're completely right. I think in our heads, we've a little, like, I don't like to call it a goal, but like I myself personally, I'd love to do 100 in the year. They kind of are close enough to it anyway.
Well, I mean, what we worked out the perspective of this, didn't we, in the maths? We said, I mean, one podcast show launched every week was 52 a year. 2 a week is 104 a year or something like that, if I'm right. My maths.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it would 52. Yeah, it's mad. It's mad. Guys, I think that kind of brings us to the end of this episode on fear of failure. We are, you could say, our first episode, our first podcast, our very first episode, and someone else's podcast has been going for thousands or hundreds of episodes. You could say we failed, but no, we didn't. We just took what we did and got better. And every day we're getting better. Every podcast we're getting better. And it's the same in everything in life. Everything we're doing. Like at the moment, I'm doing a lot of outreach. To be honest with you, I'm not necessarily saying I'm the best person at outreach, but I'm getting better. And eventually, if I persist and I keep doing it, like, it's funny. When you're sitting at the laptop, Alex, and you're like, I'll just browse social media, right? Which I really am trying to become aware of that. Not that I was never the worst at it. I had like blockers and stuff on. Now I go, no, Joe, I'm just going to reach out to someone.
Imperfect action.
Yeah, just keep doing
Imperfect action, literally. Just ship it. I was just talking to somebody else about this. I was at Tim's house, good friend Tim, and we were literally talking about how some people have this real perfectionist mindset that they'll get so close to launching something or doing something, and at the last minute they'll pull out, or they won't do something. And Tim is of this mindset of, look, if you get the majority of the way there to launching a product or doing something towards a goal, just send the email, just launch the product, just do the thing. Do it and see what happens. It may work, it may flop. If it flops, you learn from it. If it works, you are thumbs up.
I'm so excited. I can't wait to see, like, as this builds out compounds, where we'll be in like 2 or 3 years' time as things build out. Can you imagine
in a year's time? Let's do this. Let's listen to our first podcast episode in a year's time and see, 1, how the podcast has come on, 2,
where
how
it's
we
going.
communicate. How we're communicating, and maybe 3, like where we actually are as people, as business owners. I think that's quite an interesting concept.
I think that's very exciting. Well, there it is, folks. In a year's time, join in for the podcast. We review ourselves. Here, do you know what? Again, that does now eventually, finally bring us to the end of the show. I actually found I was messing around with this Riverside, right? And I
say it's the end of the show. You say it's the end of the show, and then you bring something else up.
Yeah, but I can't find what I want. There was like sound effects that I could.
Oh God!
Oh, it's not here. I can't find it. I was going to give us a drum roll exit or something like that, but I can't find it. But indeed, guys, we'll talk to you all soon. Make sure to hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, hit whatever button's there, except for the negative button. You do that as well. We'll know who you are. We'll find you.
Unsubscribe.
We have a very select set of skills with data. We will find you. I won't say the rest of it. Remember, PG.
See you later, guys. Have a good one.
Take it easy. Bye.